Welcome to the second public forum on the budget override question, ballot question number 4. We're here this evening at Whitebrook Middle School, and we appreciate Easthampton Cable Access Television for providing the opportunity for people who couldn't be here in the room to still benefit from the discussion that we're going to have this evening. We realize that the City Council has put before the voters of Easthampton an extraordinarily important and challenging question related to the future of Easthampton Public Schools, and in my view, related to the future of the community as a whole. And we're here this evening to try to provide information and to answer questions for people who are interested in the outcome of this vote. To help provide an overview and some of the information in terms of how the funds will be used in terms of their need and the actual use of them, I'm going to turn now to Superintendent of Schools Nancy Follansbee to do a presentation.
Thank you, Peter. We appreciate all of you being here. I do want to introduce the other members of the panel, and we'll start down at, I think most of you know the mayor. We'll start with the mayor, but if you'll each introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Mike Tausnick, Mayor of Easthampton.
Vito Perone, I'm the high school principal.
I'm Joanne Drum. I'm a teacher here at Whitebrook and also a resident of Easthampton.
I'm LaDonna Crow, school committee member.
Andrea McCollum, the assistant principal at Whitebrook Middle School and also a parent in town.
I'm sorry, could you...
Andrea McCollum, assistant principal at Whitebrook Middle School, and I'm also a resident, has been for 20 years.
Thank you.
Okay. So what we thought we would do this tonight is start off by giving you some factual information about why the school committee felt that it was important to request an override. The school committee has asked me to provide information to them all along in this process on the budget process and the state of the budget in the Easthampton schools and its impact on the Easthampton public schools. So tonight I asked my business manager, Andy Paquette, if he would create a PowerPoint with some slides, and I think you all have those as handouts. And then Andy's going to walk us through that. And then, Andy, after that, I'm going to ask you to join the panel as well so that other questions might be able to be directed to you. So, Andy, you want to start with that? And then, do we need to move now?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Student body right or left. Here, you think you're far enough out of the way?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Have the slide back in front of us.
Perfect.
Sure.
You better have some.
Maybe if we're going to kill maybe one of both. That's better. I think that's good. Well, I want to thank the panel and thank the members of the community that are here. Superintendent Follansbee asked me to put together some information, as she mentioned, regarding the history of the budget and the funds that we have used historically for providing the services that we have over past years, and the reason why it is that the committee has requested an override. So that is what this very brief PowerPoint presentation is going to highlight those facts for everybody. What we have here, this first slide represents the funds needed for a level service budget versus what was actually appropriated on the city through the city budget process. So we have fiscal years 11, 12, 13, the funds needed, the actual funds appropriated, and then the gap highlighting the delta between what we perceive as level service versus what it is that we were provided. And you can see in FY11, the gap was just under 1.3 million. Same for FY12, 1.3 million. FY13, and we can talk about the budget process regarding why is that just down to $500,000 for this fiscal year. As much as you look at that, it probably raises lots of questions, but we'll get to the reasons for that. And then our projected FY14, we are looking at just over $900,000 gap for level service. Does the state supplement this? This is through the budget process. This is the state appropriated. All the state funds come to the city. The city ends up through the budget process, ends up giving. So within that actual column is a Chapter 70 fund that comes to the, yes,
Contributes.
correct. One of the primary funding sources that we have available to us is the school choice tuition in. It's monies that we receive for students choosing to come to Easthampton from other communities. And you can see the change over the past 2 years about what we have available and projected to use. The end of FY11, we had 1.3 million. So we anticipated using and used for FY12, which is about 500,000, and then down to for the end of this fiscal year, down to $315,000. So that delta from June 11th to June 2011 to June 2013 is just about $1 million.
I'm sorry, Andy, I was going to say, I'm not sure if you clarified, this is a reserve fund.
Correct.
So it's cumulative
It
that
is.
we've been able to save, that we're now dipping into up to extremely dangerous levels, as you can see,
Correct.
or as the graph shows.
Yes, we have in the past, well, during the better economic times, through other funds that were available to us, we have, as Bonnie has mentioned, Ms. Katusik, that we've been able to keep the school choice revolving account as, it's the equivalent, in mind, people think of it as equivalent of a city's free cash, and they use that for reserves for emergencies. And with the economic times we've had,
It's in addition to the numbers you just showed
That's
in the
correct.
previous slide?
Yes.
Okay, so these would be added to that?
Yes, it is what, when you look at the total funds that we have used to fund the budget, it is the city appropriation plus those funds that we have.
Okay.
The next slide shows what is called the circuit breaker revolving account. It's another revolving fund we have. This is a program that the state has for high-cost special education students. The state has a reimbursement formula that they use for reimbursing districts on for a cost amount above a certain threshold for circuit breaker expenses. And again, you look and see in June 2011, we had 158,000, and we're projecting to end the year with 59,000 left. So that is a delta down of about $100,000. So between the choice and the circuit breaker, you are looking at $1.2 million we are not going to have available to us from the times where we did have available to us to use to supplement our programs.
Are these earmarked funds, these special education expenses?
As far as earmark, they are specifically to be used for special education related expenses. So yes, we can use them for out-of-district placement tuitions, we can use them for in-district therapeutic services, special education staff. Primarily, we use them for out-of-district placement tuitions.
Now, are these funds that you acquire from the state, I guess, are they based on the number of special needs students that you have?
They're based on the cost. What is it? There's a formula for circuit breaker, which is they come up with a foundation per pupil cost, and then they expect the districts to fund, there's about 4 times above that foundation per pupil. Anything above that threshold dollar amount, they come back with a reimbursement based on a calculation of, they have a fund that they have available, the circuit breaker fund, and then they allocate it out based on that formula for what it is. The goal has always been 100% reimbursement. We've been bouncing around between a low of 50% reimbursement to looking at approximately about 70% reimbursement for fiscal year 13.
Okay, when you're talking about the district, you're talking about what? Could you define the district?
Easthampton Public Schools.
Just Easthampton?
Just Easthampton,
Okay.
correct.
And just a point of clarification, Andy talked about how that money is used for out-of-district tuitions. So we sometimes get tuitions from students who move into our district, not from Easthampton. They move into our district to become Easthampton community members with out-of-district placement plans in their education plan for $200,000. And so we can't always anticipate that, but those are the kinds of expenses that circuit breaker helps us pay, but doesn't pay entirely for those kinds of expenses.
And I was going to add one more thing. Last year, the state drastically cut the circuit breaker amount in 2012. So that also added to the decline of our revolving or cumulative amount. They have restored, not all, but
Correct.
most of it.
We're up to now about 70%.
Yep, 70%.
Correct.
Now, when are those numbers determined? Is it at the beginning of your budget year? And do they change after the budget
Yes.
is passed?
Yes.
And
It doesn't, it's not at the beginning. We have an idea based on, there's a circuit breaker program that we end up having to drop in the information regarding our high costs, and then we can sort of do some extrapolation of some projections. But what ends up happening is we never know how much the state is going to end up reimbursing the cost above the foundation amount. So we can, be conservative on our 60%. If we end up getting a 62% reimbursement, then obviously we're better off.
so this is an estimated number rather than an actual.
It's estimated on what it is that we plan on using. It's very fluid in nature regarding the special education costs. We might have a student move out mid-year, so we don't need to use all of it. But this is based on our budget as we know it today. From ending fiscal year 12 with $150,000, we plan on leaving $60,000 at the end of this fiscal year. Next up, we have a combined state and federal grants available and used. We always expend all of our grants. We never turn any money back. And by turn money back, if we do turn money back, it's because the grant has a rollover provision that we can end up using in the subsequent fiscal year.
Now, what is a grant?
A grant is, there'd be things that are funded from special programs outside the local governing body. We have state grants, such as a kindergarten grant program. We don't have it here, but there are grants for academic support. There are special education grants that are federal grants for federal laws of the PL 94-142. There's a Title I grant for low-income students. There is a grant for professional development, a teacher quality grant. So it runs the gamut of what it is that these grants can be used for. But they are used to supplement the programs here.
Do you have to apply for those?
Some of them are entitlement, some are competitive. So the entitlement ones we get based on applying, based on what they have available and what it is that they determine for calculation purposes. For example, the Title I would be based on the low income in the district and other factors. It's a complicated thing, but so it is used based on those parameters for those entitlement grants, but there are competitive grants that we go after to help supplement programs here in the district.
I think a good example of this is we use Title I grants, which are some of this money, for teachers who work with our students who are struggling in reading and math. So it's an extra support services for our students. As our grants continue to shrink, we need to continue to provide those services to our students as part of a high-quality education and in order to have them be successful in our schools. So as our grants shrink, we have to try to find our funds from the local budget or from our choice reserves to try to maintain those services for our children. Same for special needs students. We use these grants to provide services and personnel for working with our special needs students. As the grant monies diminish and we want to keep the level of support services that we've had in our district for our children, we have to try to find other ways of doing it. That's one of the reasons you're seeing those choice accounts go down so dramatically from year to year, because that's where we're having to go to get the money to make up for the money that we're losing through the reduction in grants.
You said that we have to compete for those grants?
Some of them.
Some of them.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the competitive criteria?
It depends on the grant itself. There's a grant that we applied for it was the creation of a virtual school with some other partnering communities, a virtual component, a hybrid for support programs. That was a competitive grant where there was a application criteria that we had to fill out and come up with a plan, a program that we plan on potentially exploring, submit the grant, and it gets reviewed at the state, and they come back and award it or not award it.
We've used a number of our grants for technology. That's how we've been able to stay somewhat up to date with technology in our schools through grant funds. But as you can see, they're diminishing as well. So.
If you were to get a grant, that means that, and it's competitive, you have paperwork to fill out, would mean that you probably have to do all of that work well before the budget is set up, in
Yes.
hopes that you'll get that grant during that budget period.
Yes, yes.
Let me
Depends
just
on-
interrupt for a moment. This is just a technical piece. If we're not speaking here, the people at home on Channel 5 and 20 are seeing part of us and hearing part of us. So if we can get people to come to the podium for questions and answers, that will allow people who are not in the room to also benefit from the important information that's being
Can
discussed.
we move this around?
Well, I think part of it is that the camera's fixed. You're okay.
I'm okay.
Right, but we hear
Oh,
questions.
okay.
We hear questions from the audience, but you can't hear them fully, so I think people are hearing part of the answer, but only part of the question. So, and I don't know if it's, we can always go back to all these slides, so perhaps if we got through the slides and then allowed people to come here to ask the questions and you could continue to answer, if that would just allow everyone the benefit of the information that's being discussed.
Sure. So continuing on with the overall grant aspect of our programs here in Easthampton, we have a combined entitlement, which are grants that we automatically receive. We have competitive grants that we apply for that as long as they fit in with the programs that we want here, we go through that process to try and help supplement the programs we have here in Easthampton. I'd like to highlight, though, again, based on this grant, this slide here, we had $2 million in FY11. We're down to, in FY13, just under $900,000. That's a $1.1 million delta. So from the two previous slides to now, we're up to
I'm going to slide you there and I'll push the buttons. Does that work?
Sure.
Sorry.
That's okay. So combined between the previous two slides and this slide, we're looking at over from fiscal year 11 to fiscal year 13, other funding sources used in the district for programming as a reduction of about $2.2 million right now. Next slide, please.
Okay. Oh.
If you arrow to the right.
Yeah. How about if I just hit that one? Will that work?
Sure. We have other revolving accounts which are similar in nature to the concept of the school choice and circuit breaker, they are program-based that we have that we are allowed to use to supplement programs in the district. The primary ones would be tuition programs that we have. We end up taking in students to take part in programs that we offer that a district might not have, and we enter into a tuition agreement with them. We can then use those costs to offset our expenses. We do charge a transportation fee per student for those students that live within and are not entitled by law to transportation, and they also have a building use revolving account. Those are the three primary revolving accounts we have available to us that we use for supplementing our programs. The revolving account would be for any program that rents space in the district. We do charge funds for them to use it, which are then used to offset custodial, maintenance, and building-related expenses. Again, I highlight in FY11 we had $360,000. We're down to $178,000 as of FY13 for a delta of about $180,000. So what we are looking at, combined funding sources available to us over the years that we're looking at here, is a reduction in funds available to us of about $2.4 million that we don't have. So that is, I'd say, regarding the funding source, let alone the program side, but the funds available to us just are not there. So that gives us kind of the nutshell, a brief overview of funds we use for programs in the district. And then the last slide that we have is something that I know has been in the paper and discussed at different forums. This is information provided from the city's finance director regarding the impact of the override on the tax rate for citizens in Easthampton, and we just have an example here showing what the tax rate impact would be for, as we estimated, the first year for FY13 of $255,000. It would be 18 cents per $1,000, and then subsequent FY14, the $1.4 million, the dollar impact, and the $1.03 for year 2. With an example, she actually broke out what an annual cost, monthly cost, weekly cost, and a daily cost would be on a household for, as an example, the single-family home with a value of $228,700. That's the presentation we have, so.
Right. Can I just ask?
Sure.
We just ended up, oops. I want to go back. Andy.
Hit escape or.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, here we go. Just for the benefit of the folks who didn't get to see this, we were delayed in terms of getting the video feed up. So again, I just wanted folks who may be watching this either live on television right now, just briefly, if you could just walk through this again, and then we'll move them quickly.
What this slide represents is the city appropriation for the school that is directly controlled by the school committee and the district. This is the school district's operating budget. FY11, we project a level service budget of $16.1 million and an actual funding of $14.8, and FY12, 16. Sure. FY12 is $16 million with an actual funding of $14.7, and FY13 $15.5 million and a funding of $15 million, and an estimated FY14 of $16.6 million and an actual projected of $15.7 million. And the gap on the far right column here is the difference between the level service and the actual funding. Level service, level service are programs that we currently provide that we wanted to continue to provide in the district over those fiscal years.
Okay, great. I think that's helpful. Should we return now to up here, and we're going to leave this up?
When
we move it out of the way, and then we can bring it back. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, so I don't blind you guys. I keep getting messages from people watching at home. This is the curse of modern technology. I don't know what that says. Try again. Sorry. Thank you very much, Nancy and Andy, for that information. Did you want to add some further comment to that?
I just wanted to add one more piece that we've been talking about all along. As you can see, as our funds decrease, we've had to eliminate teaching positions in our district. In 2009, we eliminated 18 positions. 2010, we eliminated 19 positions, and we also reduced some positions to less than full-time. In 2011, we returned 11 positions, but we still had a net loss of 16 positions from 2009. And in 2012, we lost 6 positions. 2013, we lost 7 positions. Now, the number of positions that we've lost is decreasing because we are getting down to bare bones. That's where we are now. We really cannot survive. We cannot go on with the kind of education that we've had in the Easthampton public schools if we're going to have to make another cut to our budget, a cut of potentially $900,000. What we've done to maintain this bare bones structure in Easthampton is to use those reserve funds, particularly the choice funds. But we're down now to approximately $360,000 left in our choice funds reserve. So you can see that that's not going to go very far in terms of a $900,000 gap that we're facing potentially this year. Could be higher than that, but we wanted to make it as conservative. So conservatively, $900,000. We have had to cut programs. We've had to cut services to children who need extra support in reading and math and special education. And we've had to increase our student-teacher ratios in classrooms. We had to cut elementary school teachers this year and move children around from building to building. And we really don't know where we possibly are going to make the cuts again without a major impact on our school district. In essence, with facing a $900,000 gap, I will be in the terrible position of having to begin to dismantle this school district. And we will start on a path towards state takeover. And that's what's happened with a number of districts who found themselves in similar situations. So when asked why we're putting forth this override and why we're trying to get the message out about how important it is, that's how important it is. I really don't know how we're going to survive a budget gap as is predicted this year. We won't have the same school district that we've had. We won't have the same school district that many of you benefited from, those of you who've lived in Easthampton, and I don't know what it will look like, but we will be dismantling the school district if we don't have any other funding coming into the schools. Let's see. The other thing I just want to mention that I think it's good for people to understand is that the state continues to give mandates to schools. So, people have said, well, why can't you tighten your budget? Why can't you live within your means? But what happens is the state has a number of mandates that we have to fill, and they're unfunded mandates. They don't give us the extra funds to do these things that they're requiring us to do. So not only do have they not reduced any of those state mandates, they've increased them. So we have more mandates this year than we had last year, and we're predicted to have more next year. And these are unfunded mandates. So that's another thing that happens, that as the state stays up here with their mandates or continues to raise their mandates, this is what happens to our budget. And the gap is getting bigger and bigger. So that's the situation that we find ourselves in now. Peter, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, or maybe other people on the panel. But
Well, I think I'd let, if there's anyone else on the panel who'd like to speak immediately to what the superintendent and our business manager, Mr. Paquette, have said, now's the best time to do that. And then, if there's anyone else on the panel who'd like to speak briefly, I do think it's important that we take questions from people in the audience, because they've come to get information.
and give statements too, I believe. So.
Right, as well as to give statements. Yes, I mean, both. So, yes, please, Principal Perone.
It seems that when we have conversations like this in this forum and in others, we talk numbers and we talk data, but realistically, when the cuts are made, they affect students and they affect teachers, and we're really talking about people. We're asked to talk about positions when we bring back budget information to a faculty, but we're really talking to them and looking at them and saying that seat's going to be empty, and there's not going to be a person there that has interactions with kids anymore, and there's not going to be programs with teachers who care about the kids of Easthampton in them anymore, and that's really what this is about. So when I started 3 years ago, I had five more faculty members who were positively affecting the kids in this community in my building. Those people are gone. And that's what this is really about. It's not, for me, it's not really about numbers, and it's not about FTEs. It's about the people that are interacting with students. And that's why this conversation, this override has been discussed and brought forward.
Thank you.
And if I can add to that as a teacher, it's
And,
about...
and by the way, since we weren't on video
okay.
before, I apologize. Principal Perone spoke before, and if everyone would just introduce themselves again so that people at home know who we are.
And I'm Joanne Drum. I teach here at Whitebrook, 7th and 8th grade, and I'm also a resident. Having been here since 1994 as a resident, 1995 as a teacher here at Whitebrook, I saw the good times where we were giving quality education with appropriate class sizes, materials, and a lot of energy from the community to make us a better school. I've seen us take years of this energy from the community supporting us to make us a better school system. I've seen us become, every year, a better school system. I've seen teachers working as hard as they can for students and seeing students respond very positively to the care and the culture of our school. I also see the last few years a lot of tired, stressed teachers because we're working with more students. And that might not sound like a big deal, but if you can forgive my weird sense of humor. It would be like you had a party of your preteens, and you invited 5, and it'd be a nice party. You invited 10. When you get to 26 students, 7th and 8th graders, and may I also add, they're not little children, they're tall children, you're having a whole different atmosphere in the room. And while I'm not saying that it can't happen, because I know my family always says, well, we had 30 in our classroom. It's a different world. We're not sitting there in chairs anymore, raising our hand. We're asking students to participate in their education, to be learners, that we facilitate their energy and get them to learn. It's really difficult at 26 in a classroom. Some people are getting lost no matter how hard we try. So I'm kind of begging you to consider the consequences of the students, as well as the teachers and the principals, but mostly it's about how does that affect our students. We have great kids in this town.
Thank you. Please, introduce yourself again.
Andrea McCollum, the assistant principal here at Whitebrook, new in August, the middle of August. But I'm also a resident and have lived here for 20 years, and I have a daughter that attends school here who's in the 8th grade. And moving here, we made the conscious decision to come to Easthampton, and felt that the schools were good schools. And my daughter has done really well here, and I really think highly of Whitebrook. It's a great school with great teachers. And we are very lucky here to have the teaching staff that we do. But also as a vice principal, to see the struggles that are here that I did not have an idea about clearly as a resident and a parent until working here. We cannot say no to this override, because it would be devastating. We have teachers that are working extremely hard. We have classrooms of 24, 25 children. We have teachers that are teaching more than their subject area to make ends meet, to help support our students. And to consider having to cut $900,000 more would be devastating. And it really would be hurtful and harmful to the kids in our community. So I urge you as a parent, as a resident, and as an administrator of this school to please vote yes.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak now before we hear other statements or answer questions for folks from
I just want to, one final statement is say that it really is about the students. You're right, Dr. Perrone, and everyone else has spoken about that. That's really why, you know, we are here supporting and well, trying to give you information about why we are in this position of requesting an override. It really is about our students and being able to provide that high-quality education that will prepare them to be career and college and workforce ready in the 21st century. And now we should let everyone have a chance to ask their questions. And
Right, and we would just ask that if you do want to speak, that you come to the podium, because that's where you're mic'd, and the folks at home will hear your question, as well as being able to hear the responses, or hear your statement, whichever it is. And all we ask is that you say who you are and where you live in town. Thanks.
I don't know how many questions you want to take.
We'll do our best.
Okay. My name is Norman Roy. I live in Easthampton, and I live at 359 Main Street. Taking a look at all of the information that's been presented, where I worked, we used to call them foils or slides, so I'll use that determination or that wording if I can. One of the things I'm a little confused with is 2013, we're looking at an actual funds needed of 15.4, and the actual is going to be 15,000. And then there's a big jump in 2014, all the way up to the funds needed will be 16.5, roughly, and the actual will be 15.7 roughly. Why the big jump going from fiscal year, I assume these are fiscal years, right? Which starts?
July 1.
July 1, okay. Why that big jump?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, do you want to go, Mayor?
Or that large increase?
There's several factors, I would say, but when we do our budget development, we end up factoring in there are known movements of bargaining units along their salary schedules, no factor in for cost of living yet, just movement along from the master step 1, step 2, so on and so forth. But we do know we have had some costs that we incurred in the middle of this fiscal year, beginning of this fiscal year, that were not budgeted for in FY13 that are going to have to be budgeted for in FY14. Primarily, we've had 3 students, I believe, from move into the district that are special education tuition that weren't budgeted for, that we need to budget for. That's part of that. We also know in the state, in the special education program, they have the operational services division does what they set the rates for those approved programs that you can charge for tuitions. They have come out with a % increase that they're going to allow those programs to increase their tuition rates for fiscal year 14 so that we can use it for budget development.
Okay.
With that information, the special education director has extrapolated projected expenses for special education tuitions into the next year. We've also gone through and realized that we do some estimates for inflation rates for operating expenses. What we end up using for an inflationary factor is a set, for lack of a better phrase, unless we know it's a 2.5% increase. We use a Proposition 2.5 as the rate. So we have gone through in all our operating expenses, we have projected out increasing 2.5%. Some may go up, we might be able to recognize savings elsewhere. But one of the also things you have as far as funds needed versus the actual funding is from years we've had, and it's sort of a trend regarding all these things, and it goes to even the change in the gap from FY12 to FY13 is that, and this is not a testament to, as a business manager, it's a testament to the administration and the teachers here, is that we are sensitive to what it is that we have available to us for funds. So we have gone through and exhausted every efficiency that we can. And so now we're at the point where from FY13 to FY14, on the expense side of the equation, there is no more efficiency that we can gain from this. So in order to continue on with the level service, we are projecting that that's what we need for FY14.
Okay. Well, let me see if I understand what you're telling me. Is the largest portion of the increase here in anticipation of a new teacher's contract, and what you expect to see in increases in salaries, wages, and benefits?
I mean, it's a part of it. I wouldn't say it's the whole part of it.
No, but it's probably the bulk of it.
I think in any organization that's labor intensive,
That's right.
it's a self-evident truth that the largest portion of the budget in an enterprise like education is to pay the people who are with the children in the schools.
Right.
That's a truism.
Now, I also noticed the past 3 years, the funds needed has actually come down. What's the reason for that? Has the student population come down?
Well, that goes to, I would say, from my point, it's a combination of the administration looking at their needs year to year and what is it that they can do, and being sensitive to the financial conditions that we found ourselves in. If you look, they've gone down regarding the local appropriation, but what has been the price of that? The price of that has been the supporting charts to show that we have used our supplemental funding sources available to us to offset those needs.
We also need to keep in mind that once a service level is established in a given year, that if that service level is below the service of the prior year because of the budget gap, you essentially have lowered the standard for the comparison to the next year. Right? If you provide fewer services in the second year than you did in the first year, when you look at the third year request, the first year no longer becomes relevant, because what we're trying to achieve, or have tried to achieve in the district, is to at least preserve the services of the prior year until this initiative. the goal of this override is to restore some of those reductions in service. So when you hear the phrase level service, it means level compared to the previous year. What we're thinking that the level should be, as a school committee, is the level that would establish quality education, which may be the level, in fact, is a higher level than what we had in the previous fiscal year.
I think I want to clarify, just to be sure everyone understands, when we talk about percentage increases for the teachers, what this reflects is teachers' salaries, but it's their current salaries and the step increase that's built into the contract that we, have to honor. That's been in place, and that's the structure that's in place in all public schools. And the other piece is that, I think Andy's mentioned this, but I think it's important to mention it again, that we have relied on those choice reserves to help us narrow the gap and continue to provide those services that our students need. And now we have pretty much drained it, so we no longer have the ability to use that in helping us minimize that gap.
Okay, I realize the choice reserve may have made up some of the gap you had last year, but last year we had a school budget appropriation of roughly $14.7 million. And we actually ended the year spending roughly $19.9 million. That's a big difference. There's a lot of money made up there. Maybe $5 million? How did we go from the 14 to the 19?
We're mixing budget numbers. So the numbers that the school committee is presenting are the numbers that are available to expend by the school committee. The 19 million total spending includes about 5 million in spending that's on the city side in support of the school budget. So that's essentially building insurance, liability insurance, professional insurances of all kinds. Employee benefits, probably the largest part of that 5 million. And then the second largest part is the 1.8 million or so in charter and choice charges. So that 5 million is spent under the law in support of education. It's just not spent by the school committee. It's spent by the city. The city administers the health insurance program. We don't have a separate administration in the school for that. It's all administered on the city side, so we don't duplicate services. The city runs the payroll services for the school department.
I see that as part of the cost of operations.
In my budget. And so here.
The 19 million that you're looking at in total spending includes the city side and the school committee side. So the numbers they're presenting in that chart that shows you 11 through 14 does not include the city spending, only the spending controlled by the school committee.
So there is a portion here to be added to this, to what you just presented, that will be covered by the city.
None of the costs that have been talked about this evening are city-side costs. All the costs that have been talked about this evening are costs that are supported by the school's funding. The funding that's available to the school committee. The city-side funding may in fact go up. It's really going to depend on insurances. For example, the new high school is going to be worth more than the old high school. We got a quote today that's probably going to cost another $20,000 to insure that building because of its higher value. The health insurance likely will go up. We've been lucky. The insurance plan hasn't gone up for the last couple of years. The city council is debating, although the subcommittee has voted against putting controls for health insurance spending in place. And so I don't know if they're going to help with that problem or not, but at this point, the recommendation is to not help. But that may in fact go up.
If I look at these categories, general government, public safety, public works, cultural
that's in the city's budget,
employee
right.
benefits.
Correct.
That's all funded by the city, is what you're saying, and it's on top of the actual number that you're looking for here?
The budget you're reading from is my budget, the city's overall budget. The numbers you're seeing
this
here.
This is last year's.
I know, and so the numbers you're seeing here are the numbers in section 3 of that budget. So that total budget is about $33 million.
Section 3 of that budget is the amount that we appropriate that is controlled by the school committee and the school administration. Section 9, which contains the health insurance pieces that you're reading off that sheet, includes the cost of employee benefits for city employees, police, fire, DPW, administration, and school employees. So that sheet, which is, I think, probably the last page of the budget or the annual report from the finance director,
Yes.
lists the
From
different
Melissa.
departments that money comes from. So that's over and above using 13, the $15,005,400 that's appropriated is in Section 3 of the budget. That's at the very top of her sheet.
Yes,
And then everything else is additional money.
yeah, that's why I was wondering,
Yep.
total education expenditures added up to 19.9 million. But
Because the school department doesn't spend all of the money for education, just a big piece of it.
We don't have that money available to us. That's not part of our operating expenses. And I think an important point to repeat is that approximately $1.6 million goes out of the city budget, on the city side, to students who are choosing to go to other districts or to charter schools. And we know, and we've said this before, that unless we stay competitive with our neighboring districts, that trend is going to continue, which really drains more money from the city coffers. It's not available to us, but it has to come out of the city side. So that's at least $1.6 million.
But that's automatically covered by a 2.5 increase every year.
Well, I'll talk a little bit about the
Right.
2.5 increase.
Excuse me.
Proposition 2.5 brings in about $450,000 a year, and new growth adds another $300,000 or so. So the city, in a good year, with good new growth, which doesn't happen always, but to use a reasonable number, can expect to raise locally about $750,000 every year over the year before.
With a 2.5% increase.
That includes the we always, I'm very honest about this, we tax you to the maximum allowed by law, we do
Yeah.
every year. And so that's the 2.5% increase. And then the law says that if there were, when your home was built, that added new tax money that was over and above the 2.5. So that's called new growth. And so that's the $750,000. And someone mentioned the good times. There was a period in the mid to late 1990s, before the recession in early 2000, that the state was actually increasing state aid. And so either level or increasing state aid plus the additional local receipts allowed us to stay even with costs as they went up. Since 2001, state aid has gone down. It's I think, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think right now net state aid is almost $3 million less than it was in '01. So although we keep taxing more, you keep getting less services because the cost of living eats up all the additional tax. Whether it's insurance or wages or whatever it is, the cost of fuel, the same as you're facing, that eats up all the new money that you, the taxpayers of the community, give us, and we aren't able to maintain level services. That's why we've seen losses in the school, but you've seen them across the board. We're down police officers, we're down firefighters, we're down DPW employees, the administrative staff is working less hours, we've reduced staff at the Council on Aging. I mean, essentially we've cut everywhere. But we continue to live within our means. The problem that I believe that the school department is facing is living within its means dismantling the way we educate kids in Easthampton, which is one of the reasons that I'm sitting on this side of the panel.
I apologize. I was hoping that you could ask one more question now, and then I'd like to cycle through if there are other folks.
Just one more.
Well, you can come back again.
I could go.
Right, exactly.
Anyway.
And after other folks have spoken, you'll feel free to have that opportunity.
Okay, one more. We've got a new high school being built, and we keep hearing and reading in the paper that we're going to come in, I don't know, $3 to $4 million under budget, if I'm not mistaken. Now, how can we use that money to solve some of these issues?
Capital funding.
You're correct. The budget for the building and the actual bids are spread about $3 million. But because that's a debt exclusion, it can only be used for that project. So we didn't borrow that 3 million, and we're not going to. So that money isn't going to be charged as a tax. We're simply not going to collect it from you, and we're not going to pay it to the contractor. So the way that the bond authorization works for that is that the state is going to pay us their share, about 60% of the project. We're going to come up with the balance. At the budget level, that meant that the taxpayers were going to have to spend probably about $18.5 million. But because the price came down, we've only borrowed $14 million to date. At the end of the project, we'll borrow the balance in a permanent way. But it'll likely be less than $2 million. And so we'll likely only spend 16 instead of 18. And the law doesn't allow us to take the authorization that you gave us, the voters gave us, to build a building and spend it somewhere else. So we won't borrow it.
If I can jump in,
But
it's like
You have to use,
Actually,
you have to use the podium.
I would like to have it go to the podium and did that, so you understand we don't have access to those funds for operating expenditures?
Well, that's the easy answer, but I don't know.
It's the legally
It's the law.
bound answer.
But if we're kicking in 40%, right,
That's correct.
and the building comes in, say, $3 million on the budget,
Right.
that means there's 1.2 million there that should belong to us, and the balance belongs to the state.
Roughly, although the state isn't sharing in all of it, but that's a reasonable argument.
Yeah, and so where does that 1.2 million go?
Doesn't get
Are
borrowed.
we getting it
Doesn't
back?
get spent.
Right, it doesn't get spent and it doesn't show up as an increase in your taxes. That's money that we're not borrowing,
But
and
then
therefore
they-
not servicing that debt going forward, and therefore not imposing that amount of tax on the voters. I would say to you, to carry your argument out, if I understand it, you're right. In effect, what this budget override asks us to do by asking for $1.4 million is to treat that $1.2 million, right, as roughly equal numbers. You could see this as a way to do that. That's legal to do it. We can't do it by simply holding that money. It's just the law, right? We're not going to borrow the money because we don't need it to build the building, so it will never be borrowed.
But where's the money going?
It's not being spent.
It doesn't exist.
It's not being spent because the building is coming in below budget.
Yeah.
So we're not spending the money. No contractor is going to receive a payment, so we do not have to raise any money to pay that contractor because that work is not.
Well, I thought
So would you
the
say,
debt-
Peter, then that the projected
I apologize.
money-
I can't. I'm just going to try to answer this question and then have people come to the podium. Because I think it's a really important question. I mean, I think there are probably many people in the community who wonder, why can't we access the money that we're saving on building this new high school to address our operating expenditures?
Is it
And
money that we never had?
in effect, it's money that we never have because we're never going to spend it.
But I thought we
We have the
had,
authority to spend it, but we only have the authority from the voters to spend it to build the high school. When we put the ballot question before the voters in the city,
Right.
we were asking for permission to borrow the money
Yes.
to build the high school,
Yeah.
not for a check for a certain amount of money that we could spend any way we wish. And our obligation under the law is to say, we will borrow no more than is necessary to pay the city's portion of the construction of the new high school. That the new high school is being built at a more efficient cost is a benefit to everyone because it means that we're paying less in taxes to support this outstanding new facility. But it doesn't, there's no bonus that comes back to us that says, gee, you did a great job. You know, the mayor's office and all the people involved in the process of the building, the school building committee, they've done a great job shepherding this project through. Shouldn't there be some reward that comes back for it? We just get the satisfaction of a job well done. We don't get to borrow any more money.
you don't get to borrow any more money, but how does that affect our tax rate?
Your tax doesn't go up by the
Tax doesn't
amount
go
that
up.
we
It
estimate.
doesn't go up?
By the amount that we estimated. So when the finance director issued her statement that she said that the 18 million would cost, I don't recall, $1.03 or whatever the right number was, that meant it would cost that if we borrowed all 18. But since we're only going to borrow about 16 or thereabouts when the project's finished, the cost of that is going to be less on your taxes. So it's not going to be the $1.03 or whatever the number was. It might be $1.01 or 97 cents.
So
Well, I don't
guess
have
what-
that calculation in front
I
of me.
guess what you're saying is our current tax rate doesn't cover that money.
And it won't, if we don't borrow it, it will never cover it. And so, just to finish that conversation, what will happen probably 6 months after the school is open is we'll go back to the city council and ask them to rescind the balance of the bond authorization. So we'll present the city council and the citizens with a summary of the project. The project was budgeted for 33, it came in at 30 or 31. The state paid X, the city paid X. You authorized us to borrow 18. There's still 2 on the books. We want you to remove that authorization because we don't have a legal right to spend it. We didn't pay for a school with it because we didn't need it. We don't have a right to borrow it. We don't have a right to spend it. And that means we don't have a right to tax you for it. So your taxes are going to go up because of the school, just not quite as much as the original estimate.
That's a great question, thank you, and please.
By the
feel free
way, I
come
want to
back up.
thank the panel for taking your personal time to come here and address
It's
our
important. Thank you.
questions.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions.
My name is Joseph Barrick. This is my second time attending this meeting. I'm a resident of Easthampton here, a taxpayer. My first question to the panel, and I'm going to ask just for a show of hands, how many of you on this panel are actual property owners and pay taxes here in Easthampton? Show of hands again, please. Okay.
Oh, they're in the house.
Yeah.
Oh, in the room?
On the panel, okay. And my other question is you know, as I said at my last meeting, and as I'll say to you again, I have a slight anxiety disorder, so bear with me. I don't use it as an excuse. It's a fact of life. And I'm just going to, you know, I jotted down some of the comments that I've heard from the board members, and one of the things I learned from Smith College in past years of being past president, bargaining board emeritus, is to come out with a statement, is to say, let's see if we can agree to disagree amicably and civilly. Okay. I disagree with your statement, ma'am, that no, we can't vote no or yes, however you have put it. I said, yes, they can. That's my right. Everybody has the right to vote however they want. In regards to your statement, sir, Principal.
Vito Perone, yes, sir.
Yeah, that, you know, you look at these people that you have known and they're no longer here, or you're looking at, you know, how this is affecting the students in that. As I said at the last meeting, as I'll say to you people again, I think your idea is valid. However, I disagree vehemently with your timing, quote unquote, from the mayor. You know, a lot of our budget expenses, everyday living expenses, is just being eaten up. I don't think there's any individuals here, be it of the school board or of the mayor's office or anything. I'm saying as an individual, I can't apply for any of the grants that may or may not be available to the committees, whether it's state, federal, or otherwise. It's non-existent. So I'm going back to my same forum, is what about the people that can or cannot afford this? May I have a show of hands of anybody here on this panel that makes less than $20,000 a year?
Mr. Barrick, I apologize, and I should have said this earlier. While as an elected official, I'm happy to answer that question.
Yeah.
I have to caution you and suggest that to ask who in the room earns what amount and who pays what kind of taxes.
I'm not asking that. That wasn't my question, sir.
The earlier question this evening was, who pays property taxes?
No,
Right.
I asked how many of them actually pay property taxes.
Okay, I'll take that question as I understand it to be. And
Get to your point, sir.
I'm trying.
Okay.
My point is that as an elected official, I'm happy to answer that question for you, but I want to caution you against asking people who are simply in the room to learn to be asking questions about their own personal financial circumstances. I'm just telling you, sir, that I don't believe that that's an appropriate question to ask members of the audience or anyone who's here who's not an elected official.
I disagree with you, because if that was the format, it should have been stated beforehand. All I'm doing is expressing my point of views here. And I'm asking some general questions. If you don't like the question, then you've already stated how the forum should proceed. However, I'm not bound by your rules and regulations. I'm bound by the Constitution of the United States. It gives me the freedom of speech. Now, I'm not talking in a derogatory manner. I'm not using profanity, and I'm not threatening. So if we're in disagreement as to how I proceeded, then I'm not going to apologize for that. If we're under some kind of cardinal or Cushing's rule of parliamentary procedure, I know how to follow that. So you're just throwing this out there, and as far as I'm concerned, you're trying to blindside me with something to throw me off track, and I'm not going to tolerate it from you or any other member of this board. There are a lot of people out there that maybe are afraid to speak their piece. I'm not. And I asked a general, honest question. How many people here are making less than $20,000?
I think that's inappropriate.
Okay. All right. If you think it's inappropriate. Well, I don't.
In here, I think it's inappropriate as well.
All right, let's have just
let
the speaker.
Then I'll retract that. People are living on salaries, or let me say, I'll rephrase that. People are living on salaries of incomes of less than $20,000 a year, fixed income. And people that have been residents of Easthampton for quite a while, people who have supported the system, who either had children or didn't have children, have grandchildren. I've supported the override for the high school and stuff like that. I still think everything here is a valid, good idea. But it's the economy. I mean, I don't see where Easthampton is. We're some kind of utopia, that we're outside the norm of what's happening across the country. People just don't have the money. And if the state mandates certain things to us, and we're having to meet state mandatories, it's like, well, if we can't afford to meet their mandatories, what's going to happen? Are they going to line us up and shoot us?
That's a good question, sir, and in fact, the superintendent spoke to that earlier. One of the things that happens is that
I'm serious. I mean, you know,
I'm trying to give you a serious response to the question.
Right.
What happens is we move on the path to a state takeover of the school district.
Well, you know, I don't know what the answer is. You know? I don't know what the answer is. All I'm saying is, I think, you know, appropriate, inappropriate, or otherwise, those, you know, the fact of the matter is not only the state of the economy right here in Easthampton and how budgets are being eaten up, but I'm thinking about the people that just can't plain afford it. They just can't plain afford it. You know? And it's like, you know, you talk budget cuts, what about, you know, budget cuts people have to make? And we're just not making the same type of monies. They're not. You know? You mandate it through an override. People can't afford to take it. I mean, then, you know, legal recourse, you have the right to take their property. What recourse do some of us have, sir? That's all I'm asking. You know? There is no recourse. Yes, all your ideas and suggestions are valid. Okay? But what about the consideration of other people's?
Well, actually, one of the points, and I think we had this discussion previously.
Thank you.
But you're welcome. But I'll mention it now. I think it's important for people to understand that all of the public services that are provided are contingent upon the future earning capacity of the people that are coming through our school system. And while it is a difficult short-run cost, and I agree with the the challenge that Mr. Barrick has pointed out, if we want to have the likelihood that the safety net in the future is more secure, I think one of the most important factors in achieving that end is a solid education today. But we have time for more questions and more statements. For anyone else who would like to speak?
My name is Terry Osatek. I live on Line Street. And I too agree that you're in financial trouble, like a lot of us are. But unfortunately, I'm here to express my opposition to question 4. Everything here is valid. You need computers. I understand that. You'd like to bring back teachers that you've had to lay off, but seniors on a fixed income, workers whose paychecks have shrunk, those experiencing periodic layoffs like my husband, and we're a one-income family, are all trying to make ends meet in the face of rising energy and food and healthcare prices, and will have to shrink their lives yet again. And let's not forget those ever rising water and sewer bills. And I live on Line Street, and I got the unfunded mandate of replacing a septic tank just to be told I have to destroy it. So I will be out over $10,000 by the time it's finished. That could mean that many may have to reduce or eliminate dining out, canceling or reducing their lawn care, plowing, salon visits, etc., all affecting incomes of these people. And then these businesses will have to raise their prices, making things even worse because they're going to have to pay higher property taxes and sending more customers to the big box stores and out of town. Some residents will have to decide between heating their homes or paying for medicine in any given month. Easthampton cannot be a strong community when its tax-paying citizens are being asked over and over again to pay more in taxes and then have to cut from their own budgets. It helps no one in the end and breeds more resentment between the haves and have-nots. This means to me that this is a perfect opportunity to teach everyone, students, adults, parents, everybody, that you can't have everything you want and you need to show compassion. Being part of a community means more than asking for more money. It means understanding that you've asked for enough. The new school building was voted in on the premise of saving choice out money. Now you want more with the same excuse. When will it end? I think it should end now. No more overrides until this building is paid for. I am asking you to consider your friends and neighbors, like Mr. Farrick and like myself, who are struggling throughout town, who simply can't afford to pay anymore. When I paid my tax bill on yesterday, I spoke to the tax collector and got some information here on how this is going to impact me. Okay, my house right now is valued at $193,700, which is kind of maybe a little low average for Easthampton. I paid last year $2,570 in taxes, including the CPA. The 2.5 increase will be about $64, and what we have to pay for the new school building will be $177 for me, thereabouts, raising my taxes to over $2,800, and I didn't include the CPA because I forgot. Okay, now with that particular amount, I've got to cut something out of my budget because my budget is just barely making ends meet right now. With this new override, and I included the whole override, not Mayor Mike's idea, because no matter what, you're going to get hit with it, whether it's this year or next year. With that override, it's going to be at least $194 more dollars. So my total amount that I will have to pay more is approximately $435, not including the CPA, because I forgot. All right. If everything if we didn't use Mayor Mike's idea, that $435 is going to come out of next year for the February and for the May. So we're going to be I will be dividing about $435 divided by 2, that's $217.50 I have to come up with by February and by May. I have no idea where I'd get that money. It's not in my budget at all. I can't do it. That's an increase of 18%. Our income hasn't increased 18% in 10 years, let alone one. This isn't a game. This is people's quality of life will be drastically affected, and it won't be for the good. And you talk about dipping into your reserve funds. Well, I've been having to dip into my savings to get by. You say you don't know if you'll survive without this override. I don't know if I'll survive with this override. You talk about teachers being stressed out, and I know I used to work for the school system. I know, believe me. I used to work in the cafeteria at Center Pepin. I know stress, okay? I do. But my husband comes home tired from work after working a 12-hour day, sometimes 3 days in a row. He's 63 years old. He's getting to the point where he can't do it anymore. That's stress. Cost of living goes up. Our cost of living has gone up, but our pay has not. If he happens to get a raise, more than the amount of the raise comes out in health insurance premiums. We're 4 years apart. If I haven't found work by the time he retires, we're on the hook for $600 or $700 a month for my health insurance. I've lived in this town almost my whole life. I've owned my home since 1976. We haven't moved. It looks like if this goes through, I just don't know how I can afford it. And I don't have a mortgage. Well, not much of a mortgage, a little one for repairs. I just don't know how I'm going to do it. I just don't, and I'm not trying to complain. This is just my reality. I just don't know how I'm going to do it. I have a daughter in college. I don't know how I'm going to do it. So I'm sorry. As much as I would like to vote yes, in a perfect world I would absolutely vote yes, but in a perfect world you wouldn't need the override. But I have to vote no because I have to think of my husband, myself, my family first.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Al DiCarlo, Campbell Drive in Easthampton. From the last three people, you can gather that the economy is the problem. It makes no difference whether you're making $20,000 a year, $200,000 a year. All levels of government are in your pocket, or they want to be in your pocket. Timing is everything in life, and the conclusion everyone's coming to, timing here is terrible. The economy is deplorable. Now they're saying all types of things are going to happen because of this past storm. The gas is going to be scarce and all this other things, which is going to drive prices up. And there isn't anyone here who doesn't go to the grocery store and find out that the things that you bought today are $1.50 more than they were last week. But being a reasonable man, I'm willing to compromise. I direct this right to the mayor, requesting you, sir, to reduce the water sewer charges until we get this 2.5 paid for. People aren't even watering their lawns anymore because they can't afford to do it. This is one of the biggest beefs in this city for the last couple of years. when the rates went up. They're excessive. I don't know what you people are paying for, but how about giving us a break? That's what everyone here is saying. Stop digging into our pockets. We're willing to work with you, but give us a break. The school's a great idea, and I love that song about it's for the children, but that song doesn't work with me either. I won't vote for the override under the current conditions because everyone's picking it out of my pocket. And if the mayor would consider that suggestion and go forward with it, you just might get an override through with no problem whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you. Other folks who would like to speak, who haven't had a chance to speak yet?
Bonnie Katuzik, I'm a member of the school committee. On my second term, a resident of Easthampton. 4 kids, 1 just graduated, 3 in the system. I am a property owner here in town. And I am voting yes on the override. And this was a long learning experience for all of us. I am a CPA. I have a nonprofit background. I do a lot of budgeting myself. I work for a school for the deaf in Long Meadow, so I understand the budgeting and the economy process. And I can tell you that I have been very impressed with the administration and the leadership team in Easthampton and how carefully they look at every penny that they can when they're doing the budgeting. I've never had a concern since my time on the committee that monies are being spent inappropriately. To try to explain numbers in one short session can be very difficult, and I commend Andy and everyone on the panel and the mayor for doing that tonight. And there have been some great questions, and I appreciate people's concerns. And I always say, if you are informed voter and you vote, then that's what I appreciate more than anything else. What I wanted to talk about today is a lot of people are saying live within your means. At the last school committee meeting, we had 2 of our leadership team administrators talk about their goals for this year. Dr. Vito Perrone and our special ed director, Ann Knapp. Ann Knapp talked about IEPs, individual education plans, and 504s, which is another area of kids that need special services in our schools. And the goals that she has, those students also have to take the MCAS test. Those students also, we have to look at their scores, and those scores are included in the scores district-wide, and they affect our assessments and they affect our programs and our grades, if you will, at the state level. Because, again, positions have been cut, a lot of the positions and the teachers and the staff who work with those special needs kids and the 504 kids who are special accommodation kids have been cut. So a lot of the teachers' time is spent on more than one student or in multiple students. These are not students that can be put in a classroom taught with the rest of their regular peers. These are kids who really need a one-to-one, and many times we can't give them that because we can't afford it. Dr. Perrone, we had a lengthy discussion on the graduation rate. The information that goes into coming up with the graduation rate is very complex, but at one point he talked about the high needs kids, or the high risk kids. These are kids who are in classrooms with their regular peers. However, due to no fault of their own, issues going on at home that, again, they have no control of, they are the ones who tend to slip through the cracks if we don't have the supplemental staff and support staff that's needed to keep an eye on them, to keep them in the school district. And these kids, once they slip through the cracks, chances are they're gone. So on the other end of the spectrum, we have enrichment programs. We have AP programs, which have been funded heavily by grants, which take a lot of our teachers' time in professional development, training, preparing the kids. And the enrichment programs is something that's been offered at some of the lower, the grade school levels and the middle school levels for kids who meet those standards, who are maybe a little bit above their peers. If we could live within our means, I think if we could fit everyone in a nice, neat little box, we might be able to get by without an override. However, with all the unfunded mandates and with everything else going on, that still would be tough. But these kids that are outside the box, which is a high percentage, I'm going to guess it's 25, 30, maybe 40% of our student population are in one of these categories that we talked about. That's where a lot of our staff have been cut. And these are the kids that are really going to get hurt. The kids in the nice, neat box, some of them are mine, I will say, they may be in bigger class sizes, they will survive. However, the kids that are not in that nice, neat little box, those are the ones that I'm most concerned about. And those are the ones whose positions we need to restore and in whose care we need to really watch so that they can become successful citizens. My oldest is a freshman at HCC this year. He had great success at the high school, and he just recently changed his major. He wants to come back to a high school and be a guidance counselor. Kudos to him. I praise him for that, and I hope he does do that because I think he'd be great. And he's always said he wanted to be local. So you never know. But I am in support of this override. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Hi, my name's Josh Mincer. I live on One Crown Drive. I am a property owner, taxpayer in Easthampton, and I have a 3-year-old son who will soon be entering in the system. And you'll have to excuse me, my comments are going to be a little off the cuff. I wasn't exactly planning on speaking tonight, so I'm just trying to yank this out of you-know-where. And let me first sort of make a very quick call to arms as a general thing. Unfortunately, how we fund school in the state's really kind of atrocious in terms of pegging it to property tax. I mean, it's very clear it puts the haves versus the have-nots, the older folks versus the newer folks, parents versus non-parents. So I would just like to very quickly sort of say as a sidebar, I really hope that no matter how this goes, either yes or no wins, that maybe the community comes together and we work to start a movement to do it like Vermont does, where everyone comes together, kicks into a pool. That state pool goes out to communities that need it. They've had that system for 10 years now. They just reevaluated it, and they found out it was working fantastic. No matter what happens here tonight, we need to find a way to move away from this funding paradigm that's pegged to property taxes, just to, so that the poor communities lose out, the rich communities do great. So that somehow needs to end. With that said, I really, really do understand how tough it can be. I am a former business owner myself. I've had to balance a checkbook. I've had to balance a budget. So I hear you where you're coming from on that. However, short-term gain, long-term loss is how I'm looking at it. The one side of the question is, well, how can we afford to do it? I look at the longer-term investments. How can we not afford to do it? We're really on the edge with the school here. If we go into receivership, we're talking Springfield territory. Is that not a fair assessment here? Springfield used to be the city of homes. It used to be this fantastic place to live in, and it spiraled down and went down. And I'm sure people probably said, we can't afford to do more, we can't afford to give more. And, I'm sorry if anyone has family in Springfield, I know I do, but it's not a place I'd want to grow up and have a good quality of life and raise a child in. That's why I came to Easthampton. I went to school here 20 years ago, and honestly, 20 years ago, it wasn't that great a place to live. If you told my arrogant 17-year-old self I was going to move back to Easthampton, I would have said you were full of it. And this place really, the town really has risen up in a new renaissance, and I think we need to keep that momentum going, because here's what happens. School goes into receivership, services get cut. The people who, unfortunately, this is the sad reality of it, the people who are the higher income earners and thus the higher income taxpayers are going to leave. They're going to go elsewhere. They've got the money to do it. And that's not a threat. That's just the reality of the situation. And as we lose more and more of the people who are really paying the taxes, that's going to put even more burden on the shoulders of the people who can hardly afford it. More is going to go. It turns into a vicious cycle where Easthampton once again falls into blight. And I really can't see that doing. And the problem is, there's no more real help coming for a very long time from either the state or the federal level. I mean, God, at the federal level, it's whatever craziness is paralyzing everything. We only have ourselves here locally in Easthampton to band together to take care of our own. And it's a tough decision. Unfortunately, it seems like someone's going to lose out on it, and that's just not fair. But at the same time, I really have to do right by my child, and I know, I'm sure every parent feels that way to some extent or another. And I'd like to think somehow that we can find solutions to help out the people who are going to have a tougher time from this. You know, I don't know what it is. I'd like to encourage people who are out there who are watching this to put your heads together, find ways to do it somehow. But with that said, I'm going to have to vote yes, and thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who hasn't spoken yet who'd like to speak? Please.
Thank you. I know some of you very well. My name is Christina Sears. I'm a nurse here in local area, so I want to first tell you that because I totally understand, I am sensitive to, and I'm aware of administration's problems with increasing budgets and having to make cuts. So our facility has suffered many cuts and many layoffs. And with that being said, I just want you to know that I hear you. I have a child in this school. I have a child, well, a grown child that has gone through the schools, through college and on her own. So there's a gap between them. So I see the differences when she went and to when my youngest is going now. So I too understand that, and I hear what everybody has said is that it's tight for everybody. When you say you have 26 kids in your class, I'm like, I have 10 patients on my floor. You know, so I hear that. I hear that. Is this override going to guarantee more teachers and guarantee smaller class sizes and guarantee technology? Is that for 1 year, for 5 years, or forever? Is this override is going to go to the school all the time? Can you guarantee that? Because, you know, you look at things and your taxes are going to be used for this, the override's going to be used for that, and then 2 years later, it comes back to you, and it's like, well, what just happened? I mean, who are you cutting? I mean, obviously, we're not going to say, well, do you think the teachers union could not take a pay raise for the next contract? I mean, you know, that's a reality. Could you give up some of your benefits to save some positions at school? You know, and it's not, because everybody needs, you know, their health insurance, because we're mandated to have it. They do need cost of living. Some people do not ever get cost of living, you know, and, you know, I mean, I couldn't technically ever afford to give up, you know, any percentage of a raise that I get, because everything increases. It's not like, I mean, I'm not taking, you know, expensive vacations, and I drive a used car, and, you know, it's not an expenditure, you know, problem. It's just, everything's going up. So I think, I mean, I hear everybody saying, you know, it's just not the right time. I voted yes for the high school. I said, we definitely need one. I went to that high school. We can't even have a wheelchair access. You know, you had to go in one floor, go down 3 hallways, get to an elevator, have a key, and get up. So yeah, I know that. You know, there are things. I don't think anybody wants to, you know, deny our kids anything, and that could maybe be a problem sometimes. But you know, it's the timing is really tough. It's really hard for a lot of people, and I mean, I don't know what else to say except the timing is hard, and it is rough. I thought about it, and I said, well, there are so many people for and so many against. Could you look into something other than an override? Send out a, you know, what the Cancer Society does. Send out, could you make a donation this year? Do you think you could? Those people that live in apartments or something that want this override, that don't necessarily see the increase in their rents, you know, like we would in our property taxes, and they want an override. Maybe they can donate $100, or maybe, you know, they can. Or can you come up with an exemption form for fixed income people and say, all right, I understand that. You know, I mean, do you have to have you figured it out to the penny that every property tax, it has to be $1.03 from every single one? You know, I mean, is there any compromises that you can make for anybody that is making, is on a fixed income, and there's all kinds of exemptions for everything. You can, appeal to the board or the city, or, this is my income, I can't afford this literally, but, say that somebody else who has a better income, yes, I can afford this, I would like to do that, or I would like to give more. I mean, there's a box on all of our tax returns. Would you like to donate any more to taxes? Who checks that box and says, yes, I would. Here's an extra $50. I mean, but maybe it's such an important issue that, something could be done other than, people feel like pinched. Like, he's like, don't take it out of my pocket. You just feel like you're being held up with a pen, and some people are just sensitive right now. It's sensitive issue is the economics. It's hurting people. It's not like, some of the other people are saying, I can't, where am I going to find it? I know you're sensitive to that because we all are. You go to the gas pump and you're like, okay, we're not taking a day trip this week or this month or probably for 3 months because I can't afford the gas. So I'm just asking that maybe if you can consider something else other than an override, one more mandatory thing in our life. Taxes are mandatory, our health insurance is mandatory, mandatory, and there is no recourse except that, well, we'll take your home if you can't pay it. So maybe there can be some exemption, something for people that really truly can't afford it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Peter, just...
Yep.
Yeah, let me just pick up a couple of points. There are no specific exemptions that allow any kind of a tax increase to affect only some. There are exemption programs that are out there. The city council is actually talking about increasing them to some extent, but they're very limited exemptions. There's generally there's income guidelines that are triggered, and they can't be tied to a particular activity, or so you can't exempt some people from the override and make other people pay, so that opportunity isn't there. I'm supportive of the question on the ballot because this is the only avenue for us to raise consistent money moving forward, and it's up to the voters to tell us whether or not they can afford to do it. It's really democracy at its bare root level. I think that this group reflects it. There are people in this group that believe they can't afford it, that although it's a noble thing and it's probably important, they simply can't afford it. There are folks in the room, I think, that are going to figure out a way to dig down, and they're going to say, yes, they can. But it is the only tool that we're offered. There is no other. We've looked. There is no other way. There aren't any allowances in the state laws for us to pick and choose who pays taxes. So I know that it's difficult, and as I've said in the past, it's really going to be up to individuals when they get into the voting booth whether they can do this or not, and it's going to be up to the community as a whole to make a decision on this. But it is the only way that the school committee could come forward and ask for more money. That's just the only method that's available to us.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't know you were going to address that.
Well,
I just wanted to say one more thing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry about that.
Why don't you go ahead and finish, and then I'm just going to continue to allow people who haven't had the chance to speak at all to speak, and then we will stay and allow people who wish to clarify what they said before to have that opportunity.
No, I'm grateful. I'm thankful that you did answer that, because I was wondering, was there a compromise? So I do appreciate that. However, when you say democracy at its finest or whatever you say, it still does not feel fair to have proponents for something that's going to, increase or propose a hardship on somebody that, one, does not own property in this town, so they're kind of taking my money, okay? Or two, they do, basically that's it. If they don't own property, I don't feel like it's fair. I really don't feel, so it's really not fair. It's not democracy.
All right, that's thank you for that point. That's an important point. I think we'll probably return to discussing that later. Is there anyone else who hasn't had the opportunity to speak who would like to speak?
Yeah, so my name's Marin Goldstein. I live on Gough Street here in Easthampton. I'm a new resident here, just recently moved here. So I want to put two things, if I could please speak, thank you. there's one thing I want to say is that there's a number of us who have been out there talking to people. I am a member of the Committee for Stronger Schools, so I do very clearly believe that this is an override that is needed in this town, and it is needed for all the kids. It's also needed for our community to continue on this trajectory of growth and potential for excellence in this town. I understand the hardships that people have, and that people have different income levels, but I do want to say that as people are out there, we've had a number of people going town to town, going street to street and house to house, that I just want to be clear, out there, I would say of the people that we've talked to, and this is thousands of people now in this town, we have seen an overwhelming support of this, and we will see it on how people vote on November 6th. And I hope that people do come out there and vote with how they can vote. But I would say well over 70–80% of the people that we're talking to out on the streets are saying that they understand this is hard and they understand that it's a challenge, but it is something that we need to do for our town. And so I just don't want to make sure that because there are some people who are outspoken here and concerned about it, there's also a lot of people out there who are not here that are very much in strength and support of this override. And for me, as a parent, as a son who's just entered elementary school, he's in kindergarten, I know that the times right now are not great. I live under that same challenge that everybody else does, and yet at the same time, I can't wait. This is his opportunity for a public education. And so I'm not going to tell him when he's 18, sorry you didn't get a very good education, sorry we couldn't do the best for you. I'm going to do everything I can here and now to make sure he gets a good education. And so I am fully in support of the override. I think that there are challenges. I think that there is the potential for other compromises that can be done down the road. I think that the Vermont model is an excellent one too that we can take to divide property tax from school support. There's lots of potentials that we can do down the line, but right now and today, in 5 days or whatever it is, we're going to be voting on this override. And I ask everybody that to make an educated choice for themselves, but also recognize that we are a community, and we need to make this decision as a community because there's nobody else that's going to help us. So we need to help ourselves and help each other and raise our kids and give them the best education they can get. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. By now most people know me. My name is Peter Marks. I live on 3 Gula Drive. I'm also with the Committee for Stronger Schools. I'm actually the chair, so it goes without saying that I'm certainly supportive of this. 2 things I came up for, because initially I didn't want to speak because I spoke so many times before. One is sense of urgency. Like when you said this, it's just like spoke to me too. I have 3 children in school districts right now who's starting. And exactly what you said, like, I understand times are tough. I just can't wait for the economy to recover. I can't wait 5 years to say, you know what, you get all the services you need. And what comes with my circumstance is I actually have kids who have special needs and who need extra help and everything. And I can totally feel when the people speak about tight budgets. I have thousands of dollars in medical bills every year. Thousands. And so I live under a very, very tight budget. I normally don't share this, but I felt the urge to do this because I hear you. Like I said, I hear you. It is tough, and I have to make this choice too because I own a home. And I have to make this choice too, but my choice right now is I feel this is the best for our not our schools only, but really for our community, because I really believe that strong schools will really give us a better Easthampton, because if kids drop out of school because they're out of this box described earlier, or we don't have the services to provide to them to keep them engaged and interested, and they start lingering outside, and then crime goes up, and then they skip school, and many other things that come with like an area where there's bad schools. I lived in Philadelphia, where the schools are not maybe as great as they are here. And trust me, it's a very different world. And like I said, I can just like urge you, like I said, take a second look, take a look if there's something that you can think of. And like I said, I really hope that with this money, if we do this, we are able to spur more growth in town. And in the end, help us actually lessen the burden on everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? I know. Yes?
I'm I'm just wondering if anybody can speak to that
Can
last
you
point. Oh, I'm sorry.
actually- yeah.
I'm Anastasia Halsey. I'm a homeowner. I live at 54 Cherry Street. And I am the treasurer, not very good, but I'm the treasurer of the Committee for Stronger Schools. I'm...
No idea why that
Thank
happened.
you.
I apologize. My son.
Okay. I'm wondering if someone who is more knowledgeable in some specifics can speak to Peter's point of growth in the community as far as the investment that goes into schools, how much that leads to dollars and cents as far as the community is concerned. Does anybody have those answers?
Well, I mean, I'll only refer you to, I think it was Realtor Bob Cannon's quotes in the recent newspaper article. I don't have particular real estate expertise, so all I'd be giving you is hearsay. But I believe Mr. Cannon was quoted as saying that the stronger the schools are, the higher the property values will get, because it becomes a desirable community, and so there are more buyers, and buyers want to settle in places that have good services. But I can't give you any.
Yeah, I think there are studies that were actually done, but I don't have them off the top of my tongue. What?
The study in Florida was for every dollar that went into public schools, $420 goes into the town economy.
Economically, okay. I believe very strongly that the future of our schools it means the better future for Easthampton. It's not, it's individuals. I know it's going to be tough, but that's where our future lies. So that's all. Thank you. I'll be supporting you.
Thank you. Mr. Boyd, I think the chance is here for you to follow up.
Thank you for giving me a second round. But also, I want to say I empathize with teachers. And they're great people, but our problems aren't with the teachers. I would like to say that property tax increases are not the only way to fund schools. There are many states right now who have gone out and they put reforms in place. One of our neighboring states in Rhode Island. I don't know if any of you know what Rhode Island has done recently, but you should make yourself aware of what they've done. Massachusetts is just going along with no reforms whatsoever. We've got leadership in place here, and I think you folks, as leaders, would better serve the schools and the citizens of this city, as well as the children, if you pressed our legislators for reforms. That is what we need, not continuing tax increases or so-called investments. They're not investments. You're going to take $1.4 million out of the citizenry pocket, which, could be applied to the Easthampton economy and grow that economy and make it a stronger Easthampton. Instead, it's going to go to the schools. Where's it going to go? We don't know. We don't have control over it. But reforms are needed, and they're needed badly. And take a look at the reforms that have been installed in a number of states. There was a gentleman, I believe, who worked for the president who said that, I'm trying to get the words together here, that you can't waste a good crisis. And we are in a crisis. And it's time that our leadership goes after, where are our representatives who are aware of this problem at the state level, who could influence the reforms that are needed, and are needed badly. And you folks know what those reforms are. You're not blind.
Which are the ones that you're referring to specifically?
Reforms?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, that there are many out there. I'm wondering which
exactly.
ones you're referring to.
Exactly. One of the things they've done in Rhode Island is they've explained to their union workers, although the union were dead set against what they were going to do, but the people voted for it and supported it, but they changed their whole retirement system. they've already cut their retirement liability in half. And by the way, I don't know if you know, but this city already has a $19 million unfunded retirement liability as of last year. Who's going to pay for that? They're going to come to the taxpayer eventually and say, hey, we need the money. That's a problem. And this is where reforms come into play. You can take a look at what's happened and I know people might get excited about it, but Wisconsin, what they've done. They've already, with what laws that they passed there, they've been able to go outside and get competitive bidding on their healthcare system. They've cut their healthcare costs already in half. And where did that extra money go? It goes to the schools. They've got money to spend. They also are putting reforms in place for retirement. The other thing they've done is, excuse me, but collective bargaining. They put restrictions on collective bargaining. One of the big things that was going on in Wisconsin, and I'm sure it's here in this state as well, people, okay, the unions require in their contract that the state automatically take the dues that teachers pay and send it to the unions. What's happened in Wisconsin is 60% of the people who were doing that, who were affected by that, decided now the unions had to go collect their own dues, but 60% of the people dropped out. They don't want to pay the dues. And I don't blame them. We need every penny that we can get these days. Retirement reform, automatic deductions, teacher tenure. One of the things that I heard, I think this gentleman told me at the soccer field one day, well, we want to retain the best teachers. How do we retain the best teachers when you've got a system in place that says last in, first out? Those may be the best teachers that are coming into the system that we've got to let go. Excuse me, but earlier you made a comment about people coming into Easthampton, Doctor. You made some comment. And this is one of the things that I was concerned about when I see the taxes continually going up. And what this gentleman mentioned, and this woman as well, is it seems like Easthampton is moving towards an elite bedroom community where we're trying to attract people with more money who can pay higher taxes, and people like this gentleman and myself and a lot of other people reach that breaking point where we can't handle the taxes anymore. So what happens? We lose our property. And then what we've got is an elite bedroom community in Easthampton, people who can pay high taxes. It seems like we're moving in that direction in this city. There's no industry to speak of to help with the tax rate. You know, the Boston residential tax rate is actually lower than Easthampton. But they've got a lot of industry, so they tax the industry, or the businesses much higher. We can't do that in Easthampton. So the more wealthy people you attracted to Easthampton, I guess, the better they can pay and afford taxes. But reforms are really the key to the future. And they've got to happen, and we've got to get our representatives behind that and stop moving in that direction. And Rhode Island did a good job with theirs because their secretary, their Treasury secretary, she put the whole plan together and she sold it to the legislators, to the businesses, and she got the businesses behind her. The unions were dead set against it. But what she did with her plan, when she put it together, she showed the union members that, look, we're not trying to take your retirement away from you, but we're trying to preserve it for you for the future. and here's what we're going to have to do in order for you to have a retirement in the future. As a matter of fact, people who were already retired had to give up part of their retirement. They also went to a partial 401k retirement plan. What's wrong with that? That's what I had when I worked. Worked fine for me. What's the problem with it?
Andy, actually, could you address the portion? I'm sorry, well, let me ask for you to wait, and then you can come here, but I think since Mr. Roy has asked the question of the operating budget costs that we're addressing here, what percentage of those are related to funding for retirement?
I mean, you're talking this?
Right, this is nothing, but on the city side, or maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, let me I'll try to answer your question, and I'll try to actually broaden that response just a little bit. Reforms, we've been doing education reform in Massachusetts since 1993. To be quite honest, we've been harmed by many of those reforms. That's one of the reasons that we get less state aid, is because of the reforms. Retirement reform has been going on in Massachusetts in a very serious way for 3 years. It's in the newspapers, it's all over. Insurance reform is going on right now. As a matter of fact, next Wednesday, the City Council is going to vote, probably the most important vote they've ever taken, on insurance reform in Easthampton. I don't know if they're going to support it or not. It's not something that the school committee or this panel can fix. Now, I don't disagree with you.
That's true,
but
and I agree with you.
There's a need today. There's only one way to answer that need, and that's to put a question in front of the voters. Now, whether you support it or not, that's a personal decision. You'll make that decision as your choice in the ballot box. But none of these other ideas are really answers to the immediate problem.
I realize that.
And so people have been working on reforms. I would encourage anyone in the room and everybody who's listening at home to talk to your senators and legislators and talk about the way that things can be reformed. And if you've got ideas from other places, suggest that to them. They hear from me a lot about that very issue. And it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming the property tax system in Massachusetts to keep up with all the reforms we keep getting. So I'm not a big fan of the way Massachusetts reforms things.
I'm talking about cost-cutting reforms.
Well, I don't disagree with you. If you ask any union in Easthampton, they'll tell you that they vote for everybody but me every year.
I know that.
And it doesn't.
That's why I voted for you.
Thank you. But it isn't really, in my mind, it's not for or against. It really is what's in our best interest. And I agree that reforms are going to lead to these programs being available for future workers. But it's an important statement, but it really doesn't, play to whether we need the override or not.
I realize that, but what I see is a lot of energy in this room being focused on increasing taxes under the guise of investment. And that's not really what's needed. If people took that energy and focused it on, like you said, I'd love to see one of our representatives sitting here tonight and listening to what the citizens had to say.
I'd like to
not
see
just
the city
the
councilor
mayor.
here.
They ought to be invited to these meetings.
Well, they are invited.
It's
and
up
every
to the
member of
leadership.
City Council, every member of the City Council is invited, and every member of the Mr. Sybeck and Mr. Knapp know about our meetings, and they know about our ongoing efforts, and they do.
I mean, the state reps. Well, they ought to be
right.
sitting.
That John Sybeck is our state rep.
Right.
And they are both present in numerous events in the community. So I think they have some sense of what it is that you're talking about. I think those are good suggestions and ones that we will continue to pay attention to as we're considering this issue.
Well, thank you for listening to me. And
thank you for the questions. We have my children.
Retirement for teachers. Teachers in Massachusetts pay no Social Security taxes.
I apologize. I missed.
I'm sorry. I'm Mark Shodoff. I'm a resident of Easthampton, also in 359 Main Street.
Okay.
I have a daughter who is a teacher in the Massachusetts system. 11% of their pay goes into their retirement plan. The state matches provides only 0.6% for the current, in the current contract. The state does not have to pay 6.25% to the federal government for Social Security benefits for those teachers. The teachers don't pay 6.25% into Social Security. They do not get Social Security when they retire at age 65 or whenever they do retire. All of their retirement comes from monies that they have put in. So when you talk about, reforming the retirement system for teachers, it's been reformed completely on their own backs at this point. If the state had, or the local entities had to pay the 6.25% into Social Security, I would like to know what dollar amount that would amount to that we are not paying in our taxes. So that's not a source of savings.
Thank you. Is there
Peter,
anyone-
just to
Yes.
follow up.
Right.
The clarify, retirement costs for professional teachers are borne by the teacher retirement system, and the unfunded liability in that system is paid for by the state. There is an unfunded liability, very significant unfunded liability in all retirement systems in Massachusetts, partly because it was a pay-as-you-go system for the first 20 years or so, until folks realized that, with a declining number of employees, a pay-as-you-go system, sort of like Social Security, isn't going to work in the long run. So they required us to make payments to cover these unfunded liabilities. The larger unfunded liability for all of us, including the state, is the guarantee for health care and retirement. That's a $25 million liability for the city of Easthampton, and the Easthampton taxpayers are going to have to pay for both of those liabilities. The reforms that were recently done across the board on all retirement systems mirror the comments about the 11%. There is some thought that for the individuals that take advantage of the general annuity retirement, the superannuity retirement, they pay their way. People who are retired shorter terms, or people who retire because of disabilities, are still need to be subsidized by their employer. So the state will help subsidize that, and actually the teachers on their system will help subsidize it there. Another problem with retirement in Massachusetts is there's 105 different retirement boards. One for the teachers, one for MTA, another for the state, and then about 6 or so for small entities, and then a whole bunch of cities and towns and counties have them. We have our own. That needs to be reformed, and that reforms are going to happen. None of the retirement changes or reforms will affect this part of the budget. The non-professional staff in the Easthampton School Department are members of the Easthampton retirement system. And although we do fund it, it's a part of that $5 million piece that I talked about earlier that the city pays. So it isn't paid by the school committee in their budgeting process. It is a part of that total $19 million that you had mentioned as being the expenditure for education. But only the non-professionals are covered by our system. The professionals are covered by their own. And so there is no cost to us.
Thank you for that clarification. Is there any other questions or comments from the audience before I ask if there's anyone on the panel who wants to have a final comment? I just want to thank everyone in the room. I think we'll probably be brief here if you're willing to hang in. Otherwise, you can see this. I have confirmation that we're live on television. Is there anyone else who'd like to say? I would like to say something, but I'll defer to others first. Take the last.
I would like to actually say something. For those of you that don't know, some of the questions regarding representatives, my company represents 12 other school systems in the Commonwealth. When you combine our budgets, and Easthampton included, we're the 9th biggest district in the state. We've been at the table with representatives. One of our other districts actually was taken over by the state for the issue of lack of funding, lack of community support. We've sat at the table with them talking about these very same issues. They're willing to listen, but it is a long-term solution. We have an immediate problem here right now. And I would say this regarding some of the things we've discussed here today from somebody from, I'd say, the outside. Prior to my company's formation, I was an auditor for the state that reviewed school systems, both programmatically and financially. I audited, between my partner and I, we audited over 120 school systems. We currently use Easthampton as a model, from administration to union cooperation, from city and community support, as a model for what it is when we go out there, because you truly have what it is, the best interest of everybody at the table here, which is focused on students first, then addressing teacher needs, and then, you know, with the understanding and confines of the community. I welcome, quite honestly, from my point of view, as nobody likes to be audited, but if this school district were to go through an audit from the agency that audits school systems, I would welcome Easthampton to go through it, because of the fact that you have a system that, from an operational and, more importantly, an educational and cooperative nature of work here, it truly is a model. And I would hate to see, because of that fact, you know, going down any other path than what was going on regarding, and we can quibble, and everybody's got their right to quibble about what it is that we're asking for. But when we say investment, we don't use that lightly. It is truly an investment in what it is that's going to continue this district on the right path where we all want to see it, which from kindergarten, preschool, through high school and postgraduate will do nothing but benefit the community as a whole. And that's from an outsider. Thank you.
Peter?
Thank you. Yep.
There was one item that I just wanted to try to clarify a little bit. I don't know that I'm going to allay anyone's concerns, but the question came up earlier, what about next year and the year after? If this is approved, you know, what's to say that it won't be diverted somewhere? There really is honestly no guarantees. So you would ask for, can you guarantee this? There isn't. This is a democracy, so there's a mayor that sets a budget, there's a city council that says yes or no. I would suggest that it's the citizens who keep us honest. I think I have a really good track record. I'm, as you know, not going to be here for more than another budget, but you can hold your elected officials accountable, especially in a local elected officials. They're so easy to reach. We're available. You know us. You can see us in the grocery store. I think that the school committee will be the watchdog for whether this money stays in their budget. And if it doesn't, I would fully expect that they would be the loudest voice in the room saying, what happened to this money the taxpayers said should be spent on schools? That should be would be, I think, a rally cry to everyone, whether you voted for it or not, that's paying, to say, wait a minute. You know, that extra money was coming out of my pocket because the schools needed X, Y, and Z. How come it's not going? How come the mayor, whoever that mayor might be, isn't putting it in the budget? And what's worse, how come the city council is letting it happen? Because the city council could say, no, you can't. And I'm going to do arbitrarily. What if $500,000 of this went to the park for whatever purpose? City council could simply reduce that $500,000, say no. They could say no. They could say, no, we're taking that $500,000 out of the budget, it wouldn't be there. Now, it also means it wouldn't be collected. Maybe that's a good thing too. But there are, I believe, in your elected officials, your elected school committee members, your elected city council, and your elected mayor, the right checks and balances in place for the public to voice their opinion and to stop a raid on this money if it's approved. Because there is no guarantee. The state law says the first year you got to do what you promised the voters. After that, it's up to the elected officials to decide where it goes. But they are responsive. Sometimes they're not as responsive as I'd like. That's okay. Sometimes I'm not as responsive as they'd like. But we're all elected officials, and I think that we're all pretty responsive, and I think that that will be the case moving forward. And truly, if you have someone who's you elected that isn't responsive, get them out of there. But that doesn't answer. The answer is no, you can't guarantee it, but I think that the checks and balances exist.
And I just to pick up on that, and then I'll have some concluding remarks and we can all depart.
I'd like to say something.
Oh, all right. Well, then I'll just pick up on one piece of that, which is to say that I think whoever chooses to succeed you in that office, there's one very basic question. Will you pledge as part of your campaign to be the next mayor of Easthampton to maintain this funding as dedicated to the original purpose as voted by the city voters? I think it's a simple question for someone who wants the office to answer, and then the voters will get to decide whether or not that person is the person that they want to elect. Superintendent.
And I would just like to thank those of you in the audience for giving us this opportunity to share with you the facts that we have and what we know about our school district and try to paint a picture for you about what we're facing. And I also want to thank you for sharing your thoughts with us and where you're coming from and your concerns, and we always appreciate hearing from the community. That's what makes our school district a strong school district, so thank you.
Sure. Yep.
I just want to say one last thing. Since I've been in Easthampton as the principal, the community has supported our students and supported our teacher and supported our programs. Everything we've asked them to do, they've supported us. Whether it's a fundraiser at a car wash or a fundraiser to send our kids to compete at the national level. So we thank you very much for what you've done for our students and for our teachers and for our programs. And I commend you for speaking tonight as sincerely and bravely as you did in this public forum. And it really was helpful to me to see and to hear those things. But I am an advocate for our kids and for our parents, or for our teachers. And I strongly encourage people to think about the effects that could happen if this does not pass, and the effects that happen if it does pass. Thank you very much.
I would just, Meredith Police, I'm president.
Meredith, I'm going to have to ask you to go here, please.
Meredith Police, I'm president of the Teachers Union, and I just wanted to publicly thank the committee for Better Schools for doing what you've done. No matter which way it goes, it's greatly appreciated for the students of Easthampton.